Hello and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's April 29, 2016. We're doing a one-camera shot today. I'm running audio and video, and I'm doing the interview. But we're here to interview Clay Christensen, re-interview Clay Christensen, I should say. Those of you who follow Mormon Stories will remember Clay's interview that I did maybe a few months ago, around Christmas time. I interviewed my friend Matt Elgren and Clay Christensen. Matt's someone that I knew at Microsoft for many years, and he had his crisis of faith many years ago, and for many, many years was sort of alone in his family as the only sort of non-believer. That was a great story to hear Matt's, but then we also paired Matt's story with the story of Clay Christensen. Clay is Matt's brother-in-law. He's married to Matt's wife, Lori. And Clay was a faithful, devout member of the church, true believer for over 50 years, if my memory serves me. And just last sort of October-ish, Clay lost his faith. So by interviewing him in December, we were interviewing someone who was very fresh to losing his faith. But also we talked about how much it meant to Matt to wait so patiently for an ally in the family to join him, and how Clay became an ally. So since that time, Clay did the interview. He was notified by his bishopric or stake presidency that he was to have a disciplinary council for doing his Mormon Stories interview. I don't think there's any other reason that they wanted to hold a disciplinary council for him. Clay very heroically contemplated actually attending the disciplinary council. We know that they would have excommunicated him, and he ended up being sort of inspired by Jeremy Runnels and deciding that instead of going through a disciplinary council, he was going to sort of claim his own power and resign from the church instead of allow them to excommunicate him. And in Jeremy's words, he excommunicated the church. So it would have been an excommunication, but Clay didn't want to take it that way. So we're here just to give you a quick update. This will be, a 50-minute interview, and we're just going to interview Clay about what happened. So I'm going to turn the camera around really quick and zoom in on you, Clay.
Not too close.
Clay Christensen, welcome back to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Thank you.
So why don't you just sort of talk to us about what happened, kind of what was the response to your podcast? Let's start there.
Oh, the response was overwhelming. There was, as you know, so many comments that you had to expand the comment capability, and I really, I enjoyed the comments, and I enjoyed responding to them and the feedback we got from people. And since then, we've just had we've been to some of the Mormon Spectrum events, and we've made a lot of contact with people, and it's been great. I know it's helped people, and that's what it was all about.
So positive response to the podcast.
Very positive.
What about in your family? So with Matt and Lori, don't talk about anything you aren't comfortable, but what can you talk about how that's been for the family and for your wife and kids?
Well, for my wife was nervous about it, but she was fully supportive of me, and she's known me long enough to know that I'm outspoken, and she thought it was a good thing to do, and she liked the way it turned out. My family's united, my immediate family, but the extended family didn't really take it well, and some watched it, some didn't. I guess the thing I would say about it is that Matt continues to be isolated, and we are isolated from our family, and they are, some would say, doubling down. They're becoming even more committed to the faith, and they're not questioning it. And it's sad, but people are going to respond to it in different ways.
Yeah, sure. So why don't you talk about how things have been in your ward and what your approach was in terms of church participation between the podcast and getting notified by your leadership?
Well, we never went back to church. The last time I set foot in church was in December, when I took my ward mission leader binder over and had a really good discussion with my bishop about why I just couldn't come back. 45 minutes, and told him about the essays and told him about the CES letter, and just had a good discussion. in January, after the word got out and Bishop told the stake president, the bishop and the stake president came over to visit, and we had a 2-hour meeting at my house. And I told them.
What month was this?
This would have been January, second week of January.
Okay.
And they were very cordial, very friendly, and that's part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast follow-up, because it has been nothing but love for my word. I'm sure there's people that are upset with me, but our ward leadership, I told my elders quorum president, had a good conversation. Friends in the elders quorum, I asked the elders quorum president to tell people that I had left because I found out that the church wasn't true, or phrase it however you want, but I left because of not believing in the truth claims of the church anymore. I did not leave because I want to sin. Back to the discussion with the stake president and the bishop on that second week of January. We talked for 2 hours, and I had been studying more since our podcast, and I was full of facts, and they said some things, but for almost 2 hours, I listed every single thing, basically a verbal CES letter. And, and it was just super cordial. At one point, the bishop got a little bit red in the face. I think he was probably getting a little bit angry. But I always try to make these 2 points. I never left because of anything wrong with the leadership of our church. I left because the truth claims are verifiably false. And that's why. And so there was just a good feeling of love and understanding, and I felt that they cared about me. I still do. And they asked how I wanted to leave it, and I said, look, I want to be like, and I mentioned a couple of other brothers in the ward that don't come. I said, I want to be like them. I just want to be the guy that's nice, friendly, but wants to have nothing to do with the church. And Mormons are welcome in my house. We don't turn anyone away. Come. But last night, a good friend of mine in our ward, in the High Council, came over, and we talked for an hour and a half. And he was concerned about me. And I love him. We just have to agree to disagree. But I felt nothing but love from our word. Sorry, long answer.
No, that's great. So real quick, between January and when you got contacted again, did they try and talk to you about your problems? Did they try and resolve your concerns? Did you have any meetings where you guys could discuss and then try and help you at all?
No, there wasn't really any meeting or any discussion after that. We left it in January pretty definitive that I was not going to be convinced that the church was true in any way, and it was a positive meeting, but it wasn't like I had questions. I wasn't a Jeremy Runnels asking questions. I was telling him what I'd found out. And in that meeting in January, I was going to tell you, the stake president said to me, he says, you could drop a truckload of facts on me and it wouldn't change my opinion. And I understand that. My faith was that strong too. And so I understand that, but the thing, at some point, facts matter, and so. Okay, so
so you left it where they would kind of leave. You didn't want their help. Fast forward to April. What happens in April?
Well, so first week of April, I got an urgent text from my bishop saying the stake president and he would like to come over on a Thursday night. I was busy. We went back and forth, and I could tell there was an urgency. So they ended up coming over on Sunday. And I felt bad because they have such a long Sunday anyway. But they came over at 6 o'clock on the dot, and we had another cordial visit, sat down, checking on, asking about my family. And I felt that they really genuinely do care about me. But quickly they said, look, we've seen your podcast. And they watched the podcast. And I said, wow, you watched all 3 hours? And they said, yeah, we watched it. And I wasn't worried that I said anything that would get me in trouble. I said more positive, more definitive things about the church not being true. My testimony was stronger face to face with them than it was on the podcast. So I wasn't really worried that I was going to get in trouble. But they said, we'd like to invite you to a disciplinary council. And I said, a church court. And he said, no, it's a council. And I said, well, I said, I'll have to think about that. That's in. It was scheduled for the 1st of May, this Sunday coming up, 2016, and I had to think about what I wanted to do there. But we had a great conversation, and they still left it as, would you still be willing to do the citizenship merit badges for scouting? And I said, absolutely. I'll do things to support the neighbors. I still love, and one of the things I said in that meeting, and I will say it forever, there are no two men that are more Christ-like that I've ever known than my bishop and my stake president. My experience is so different from what I've heard other people say, and from what, from Jeremy's experience. I watched that, and there was not love there. I don't think there can be love in an excommunication, no matter how good you are. But anyway, I told my bishop and stake president that they actually made it easier for me to leave the church, because I will never have a doubt that I left the church for the wrong reasons. I didn't leave the church because people offended me. If anything, I know that I left because it's not true. Because if the church could ever be true, those two men would make it true.
But that wasn't enough to keep you in.
No, I'm not going to. I'm someone who cares about the truth too much to subject my family to it. And, without being too negative, being aware of what happens in the church over the last 6 months, I've come a lot more aware of it, and I see a lot of the damage that it does. And I'm really glad that my family and my children, my grandchildren, I'll be able to raise them. They'll live outside of the church, and it'll be a good thing for their lives.
Did you? How did you feel? Did you want to be excommunicated? Did you want to be kicked out of the church?
No.
And if not, why?
No, that's a good question. I never resigned because I didn't want to send a message that I don't love my neighbors. It's it's at best it's a really expensive club, and it was one I enjoyed being. I love the association. I would never go into the church again. I would never set foot in there because I don't support it. I don't support what it stands for. But I didn't want to resign, and I wanted to be able to still check my genealogy and still do things like that. But I didn't want to be excommunicated for that reason. It's very hateful what it says in the letter when you get an excommunication letter.
Read what's hateful about it.
I don't even like to read this about myself, because it said, "This action is being taken due to information received that you have been involved in conduct unbecoming a member of the church." Now that might be true, because a member of the church shouldn't tell you that the church isn't true. But that term, conduct unbecoming, has a lot of meaning for me, because I served honorably as an active duty and reservist in the Navy for 22 years. And I would never want a dishonorable discharge or anything less than honorable. And so it's hurtful. It's hurtful to see people getting excommunicated. And I don't believe that Christ would excommunicate someone.
But it sounds like you're saying it's hurtful to be called dishonorable.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because
Do you feel like you're acting dishonorably?
I don't feel like I'm acting dishonorably. And like I said, I am no Jeremy Runnels. But I think we have one thing in common. We are just calling attention to the fact that the church isn't true, and the church claims that they have made, the truth claims that they have made all these years, are falsifiable, and it's dishonest. And we're calling that out. And to be clear, I think Jeremy Runnels is a hero. And people said, "Oh, wow, you're so brave." I am not brave to do this. I am able to do this because my wife is by my side. And my message is to the people that are watching this, that are in marriages that are split because of this church. Hang in there. I'm sorry for your situation, and I hope that someday you and your spouses can be reunited. That's why I do this.
So is it a matter of honor for you?
It is. I testify to the truthfulness of this church on 5 continents, and for 50 plus years. And I won't stand by and just pretend like it's okay to just go away and say that, well, I don't believe, but it's okay if you want to believe. And it is okay if you want to believe. But I have to correct my testimony. I just want to go on the record and say, it is not true. You can find out for yourself, and do find out for yourself.
So when they say conduct unbecoming, do you have a pretty clear sense of what they mean by that?
Oh, yeah. It's conduct unbecoming.
Did they tell you?
No, they said we watched the podcast. And
so you were excommunicated. You were going to be excommunicated for the podcast.
Absolutely. And
Does that make you regret the podcast?
Never. I will never regret the podcast.
Why?
Because I know for a fact that it helped reunite one couple. A husband that had been out of the church for years, and a wife that had been the suffering wife for 15 or so years without priesthood in the home, being told by the church that she wasn't going to be with her husband in heaven, all the negative things, all the divisiveness that the church does. That family's together now, and I am so happy. If there's even one more family that gets united because of that podcast, this would be worth it.
Even at the cost that
of
you
being excommunicated,
and
absolutely.
your family might experience?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's worth it. It's worth it to help people. And people have criticized, say, oh, you just want to be famous. I don't want to be famous. This is, this is it. I just wanted to answer a lot of the questions, because a lot of questions did come up after the podcast. Are you angry? Nope, not angry. It's a useless
But
motion.
anger's okay.
Yeah.
Anger's actually healthy. I want to just tell you that that anger's healthy, and we shouldn't. The church tells us that they look down on people who are angry, but I just want to say to you that anger is an important part of the healing process.
Well, I'm
telling you, it's okay to be angry.
All right. If you want to get me angry, we'll read some quotes from here.
What did you want to read about that?
Well, last time I read a quote from this book, No Man Knows My History, and I wanted to bring it up because one of the things that a lot of people have done, and this brother that came over to visit me last night, and the stake president, they said, well, check your sources. What about your sources? How do you know that this is true? And, I would refer you to this book, and I would refer you to the bibliography. It is chock full of the writings, the court cases, the newspaper articles. I mean, this is well-documented anti-Mormon literature. It's just history. It's absolute history. And, the one thing I wanted to read in here is just how sad it was for Emma. And people, there's been a lot of talk lately about Emma, and there was even an article in the news recently about Eliza. So I'm just going to read this quick story about Eliza Snow. Of the 6, and this is from page 345 of No Man Knows My History. Of the 6 wives who lived for long periods in the mansion house, apparently only 39-year-old poetess Eliza Snow conceived a child. She, as well as Emma, it seems, was pregnant in the spring of 1844. Eliza must have been torn between dread of the consequences and exultation at the prospect of facing the world, the mother of a prophet's son. It so happened that her bedroom in the mansion house was to the left of Joseph's, Emma's being on the right. According to tradition in the Snow family, Eliza emerged one morning at the same moment as Joseph, and he caught her to him in a quick embrace. At this instant, Emma opened her own door, and in a sudden terrible rage, for apparently she had trusted Eliza above all other women, seized a broomstick and began beating her. Eliza tried to flee, stumbled, and fell down the full flight of stairs. Still not content, Emma pursued her in a frenzy that Joseph was powerless to stop, and drove her out of the house in her nightdress. By this time the whole mansion house was awake, young Joseph and Alexander weeping and frightened at their mother's hysteria and begging her to be kind to Aunt Eliza they adored. Joseph calmed his wife down and indignantly ordered her to restore Eliza to her room and rights in the household. The fall, it is said, resulted in a miscarriage. After Joseph's death, Eliza married Brigham Young, but bore him no children. Now, I wanted to read this because it's real. This is real. These are real people. And I have to answer one more question that came up after the podcast, and that's the question of my wife's relationship to Joseph Smith. Her family, she's related to Lucy Mack and Joseph and Hiram through so many different ways. And so the DNA study that people are aware of has been very complex. And I just wanted to let people know there's a 50-50 chance that, my wife is descended directly of Joseph Smith through Josephine, through Sylvia Sessions. But the important story there is Sylvia Sessions was married to Windsor Lyon, and he is a victim of this church. He's a victim of Joseph Smith. He loaned money to his stake president. When he asked for it back, the stake president was offended. He was excommunicated, but he was still married to Sylvia Sessions. And Joseph Smith came along and married her. Sylvia wasn't sure who it was, whose baby it was, Josephine, but there's a 50-50 chance it was Windsor Lyon's or Joseph's. What a tragedy. What a tragedy that is to be a victim of the prophet like that. And so we don't know. But the DNA study is going to come out, and we'll soon know. And either way, it does not prove Joseph Smith was a prophet. Either way.
So your point is that people are being harmed.
People are being harmed by this church, absolutely.
What about all the people that are being helped?
I feel like, and I told this to the bishop, I've told this to my friends, I don't believe that the church is the reason why people are being helped. It's the association. It's the scouting organization or the different associations you can have. And you don't need the church to have those associations. People are good. I believe that people are good naturally. And I just don't, I have a lot of friends from my time in the Navy that we've marveled, and time living around the country, that we've marveled at how well they've raised their children outside the church. And I think it's better to raise your children outside the church. I do. That it saves them that teenage drama that comes. I will never have to worry that my children or grandchildren will one day realize that they've been lied to. They won't have to do this because of me. The 200 years of deception ends with me. I won't keep it going.
But what if they gain the benefit of not being deceived, but they lose the benefits of association and don't replace it with something better? Then you've traded down, possibly.
That concerns me, and I hope for a time when children can grow up in Utah and associate with one another and not have to be outcast because they're not Mormon. I hope that time comes.
But it's not just being outcast. It's
not
having
the richness.
not even being included. It's not having your own identity, your own community, your own sort of associations, right?
Yeah, that's a concern. I know a lot of people worry about what's going to happen to their young children, and I don't have all the answers. I know that if I had it to do over again, my children would never set foot in a Mormon church.
Yeah. So you're saying truth matters, and it's more important for you to raise your children in truth than to sort of maintain your affiliation and get the benefits from that, knowing that the underpinnings are falsified, basically.
Yeah, and this isn't to be ungrateful. I am truly thankful for the people who dedicated time and money to making my children's childhood enjoyable and teach them the gospel. I was thankful for the stake president and the bishop when my son came home from his mission. He came home after 4 days. And I didn't really talk about that on the podcast before because I didn't want people to think that that's why I left the church. Because, my son came home from mission, we're leaving.
Why in 4 days? Was it faith crisis related or other things?
He didn't tell me. His sister told him that the church wasn't true just a couple of weeks before he went into the MPC.
Your daughter?
My daughter had left the church when she was in high school because she had too many questions.
We talked about that.
Yeah. And then he went down to the MPC and he was there we picked him up on Saturday and he called us on Thursday and said, "Mom, Dad, I want to come home. I can't do this." We thought that he had anxiety. We thought that he just didn't, just wasn't able to do it. And he didn't want to tell us that he didn't believe. I mean, he didn't dare tell me that he had doubts about the church. And I thought I was a pretty open person. I wished he would have felt comfortable to tell me. Sorry, I just hit the mic here. But, he just didn't feel comfortable saying that. I'm thankful that we picked him up on Saturday and just said, "Son, we love you." I felt like Abraham. I was willing to sacrifice him, but I didn't have to. And I was completely devout Mormon from August when we picked him up until, November 7th when I read the CS letter. On the morning of November 7th, I told my wife, I said, "I'm going to see if Ethan will go with me to the temple today." And, he went to the gym and she handed me the CS letter. Several hours later, I knew it wasn't true.
So if somebody says you just left because your children left, what would you say?
I would say, weeks later, I told my son that the coffee that he smelled in the car wasn't Grandpa's, it was my coffee. And son, the church isn't true. And the reason why for that story is we had said that it might be better to tell him after Christmas when the whole family gets together. Let's not disrupt the situation. But, I'm sad. I waited a few weeks after I found out to tell him. And he was still...
But your leaving wasn't connected to his leaving?
No, not at all. He says, well, you wouldn't have been looking on the internet for information about the church if Mom wasn't Googling, why are so many missionaries coming home? Why are so many missionaries getting depression? How to help missionaries that have returned home? Because it's a traumatic event. He's had friends that have come home since then, and I think his courage to come home has helped them to come home. Not faith crisis related, but they've just said, they want to come home, and so. His courage to come home. I felt bad for him because, how do you tell your parents you want to come home from your mission? It's tough. And in the lobby of the MTC was a young man who was bawling when we picked up, my son. And he said he was talking to him, and he says, my parents are they're gonna kill me when I find out, and when they come pick me up, they're gonna be so angry. And I am just thankful that we didn't treat. Even though we were devout, we embraced him and brought him home. And I hope that any Mormons that listen to this just say, hey, love your children, and the churches and spouses that are listening to this that are still devout. I don't know that they are. Love your spouses. Your family is way more important than anything about this church. Family is way more important.
So, so you didn't want to be excommunicated. But they decided to excommunicate you for the podcast. How do you feel about being excommunicated for a podcast? Or what do you think about that?
Well, I'll tell you what my wife said. She goes, you deserve to be excommunicated. You've told everyone on the internet that the church isn't true. Why would they let you stay in?
Why shouldn't they excommunicate?
Yeah, you shouldn't excommunicate you. And it was hard to argue. And that's why, we talked about, should I go to the court or not? And I didn't want to, cause unnecessary drama, but I did kind of want to put the focus on them because I don't believe it's Christ-like. I don't believe Christ would ever excommunicate someone. But, to be fair, I think an organization has the right to excommunicate someone who is telling people that the organization is a bad thing.
But you do think it's un-Christ-like?
Yeah, it's absolutely un-Christ-like.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they should say, if they said something like, we're not going to allow you access to your LDS account anymore, fine. But, to the excommunication thing, it's medieval. It comes from medieval Europe,
Yeah. So you had the option of going through the disciplinary council or just resigning. You've talked a bit about this, but just tell us how you decided to resign versus be excommunicated.
Well, that's a good question. I wanted to kind of highlight the fact that excommunication is not Christ-like, but we went down to Jeremy Runnels. My wife and I went down to see Jeremy Runnels and to thank him one more time face-to-face for the CS letter. I can never thank him enough. And after that, I just came back and I said, I don't want this drama. I loved the way Jeremy put it. I excommunicate the church. And so I want to also thank the lawyer, Mark Naugle, who created quitmormon.com. I would encourage people to use quitmormon.com because it was very simple to do. And it was just a nice way to just take care of the legalities of resigning without all the drama. The website's easy. And also I like the fact that that they're able to keep some statistics because I think they'll show over time that people are leaving and the numbers don't add up for the church. I think that puts a focus on people leaving, and I think there should be a focus. And also, I just wanted to register my vote in a way. I want people to know I am no longer a member of the church because it's not true. And
got it. Yeah.
And if I could just volunteer one thing, people said, well, you're sinning. You must be sinning. You don't have the Spirit anymore. And I'll tell you that the only sinning I do is I drink coffee now. And I just sinned on camera, and it feels great. And I've had this mug for 10 years, and I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't drink coffee. But you'll notice that
it's got some hieroglyphics on it.
It's from the British Museum. It's got Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it's how we know
it's from the Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, it's how we know. The Book of Abraham is my favorite way to that shows Joseph Smith is absolutely not a prophet and not able to translate it, didn't have any kind of gift.
But they say
anyway.
he used it as inspiration to channel Abraham's writings.
Yeah. I guess so. Sorry. I just don't buy that. I don't buy the channeling of the writings. He put a character, then he wrote a paragraph. And that's another thing I want to talk about. Since the podcast, I have discovered that Joseph Smith was really well read. When he talked about seek ye out of the best books, he was talking about himself. That was biographic, because he was so well read. I discovered that a guy named Swedenborg had written about the celestial, telestial, and terrestrial kingdoms. That's where Joseph Smith got that. And I discovered where the Book of Abraham and the Book of Moses come from. There are books with those writings that Joseph read, and that's where he adopted it. His prophecies, his writings, his scriptures, they all came from the fact that he was well read. And there's a quote in here where Lucy talks about Joseph's father being able to read a book and recite paragraphs. I think that was Joseph's gift. He had a very good memory, very well read, and it's great. He's got some qualities that are admirable, but they're not prophetic.
Yeah. So you feel like it was reasonable for them to excommunicate you, though not Christ-like. You chose to resign to sort of claim your power, and to sort of act as an agent and not be acted upon, which makes sense. Talk about now going forward. Are you sad? Are you dark and loathsome? Are you, have your morals changed? And how optimistic are you about the future? Now, I'm gonna sort of jump in and just say, what I'm learning is that it's not like the recipe for joy and happiness is leaving the church. There are plenty of people who leave the church, and whether because they're just reactionary or just so hurt or don't have their moorings, they go crazy with their behavior in ways that become unsafe or unhealthy. Mm-hmm. Or they, their marriages dissolve. I'm not saying that to be fear-mongering, because there are tons of people that just go on to live happy, healthy, productive lives, but there's risk. And so tell me how you feel about the risk and your optimism that you're going to find health and joy on the other side.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's, for me personally, I feel like I've never been happier. I feel like I've never been more Christ-like and or more Christian, because I actually feel like I have more sympathy and more understanding for the human condition. I believe things are still black and white, truth, yes or no, and it's when you break them down to their atomic parts. But I think I understand, and to borrow a phrase, the Mormon spectrum better. I understand now that there are people that keep going to church because they just don't want to cause drama in their family, or they value what they get from the church. And I don't, people have to sort that out for themselves. And like you said, I don't want to paint the picture that everything's going to be rosy outside the church. It's rosy for me. It's great for me because my family's together. And if the circumstances were different, I might be in a different situation. And I feel like it was a tender mercy that I quit working for the church 3 years before I found out any of this. And
why?
Well, because I can't even imagine how agonizing it would have been for me to find this out. And I have friends that did find out. A friend that we talked about in the last podcast, he found out in January, still worked for the church, immediately had to find another job. It would be very traumatic to find this out working there. Another quick story is the day that my excommunication or my resignation processed. It was the 27th of April. I checked my alias account because I needed to decide, this was Wednesday, just 2 days ago. I needed to decide if I needed to contact the stake president, let him know, or if it was going to happen automatically. And so I checked LDS account that morning, and I still had access. And, interestingly, my friends that I used to work with at the church, 11 of them, we got together for a long lunch and had a fantastic lunch. I, the ex-Mormon, and many of them had watched my podcast, and all of them Mormons working at the church. We had a fantastic reunion lunch. I felt nothing but love from them, and I had nothing but love for them back. And we didn't talk about the church at all. We talked about sports, about our families, about one of my dear friends that had cut his hand with a chainsaw, and the other one was going in for surgery for colon cancer. Next day. Just friends getting together, and it was fantastic. I came home from that lunch that afternoon and saw that my resignation had been processed. And
how'd that feel to see it be official?
It is. It's emotional. And like I said, you can say, well, how could that be emotional, Clay? It's still emotional. 51 years of being a member of the church, and now you're out. It's emotional. My heart goes out to people who hesitate and don't know.
What are the emotions you feel or felt?
Just, wow, 50 years of being in a church that you were willing to do whatever. You gave your money, your time, your talent, you raised your kids in it. You start thinking of all the emotion, all the opportunity costs, what might have been. You're grateful for what was, but then at the same time there's so much that might have been different or better. And maybe there's a slight bit of anger because you were betrayed. You're lied to. But you're glad to be out of it. And I can tell you that I don't regret leaving. I'm glad I'm out. But it's still super emotional, and so, people tread lightly.
So anger, regret, and happiness, are those?
Yeah.
Are there other?
It's a flood of emotions.
Any other emotions?
Well, there's a sadness too, because my wife didn't resign. We have now, we were talking about this last night. In ward council, it will be discussed that we have a part-member family, no priesthood in the home. And we were driving around, we're talking about this, and she says, yeah, we don't have a priesthood holder in it. And when you hear those words, you remember what it used to mean and what you used to think about that, about other families with no priesthood holder in the home. And that's, you remember the sadness that you felt for other people, and then you think how sad that is that our home will be labeled a no priesthood leader in the home. And then, she said, well, yeah, but they don't either. It's not real. And so you make a joke about it and you move on. Because they don't have it either. It's not real.
So
Sorry.
what are your emotions? Don't apologize. Well, this is great. Emotions are we don't choose them.
Yeah.
And it's healthy to talk about them. So what are your emotions today, and what do you believe in now? And if you were to leave our listeners with some parting words of wisdom or, perspective. So start with what emotions you're feeling today.
Okay. The emotions today are, I want to make sure that I answer questions that people had about the podcast. I want to make sure people, that I appreciate you, John. People like Jeremy Runnels. I want my appreciation for Mark Naugle. I'm saying his name right. With the quitmormon.com, Jeremy Runnels with the CS letter, Sandra Tanner, Lighthouse Ministries, all the people.
Mormon Spectrum?
Mormon Spectrum. We have been to some of those events, and I am thankful for that because we are going to keep participating in that because it helps one another. What this is about, my emotion is, how can I help other people? I'm not looking to become famous podcaster. This is the last time I'm doing a podcast, knock on wood, unless there's some unforeseen circumstances. Yeah, but I'm not looking to become a celebrity, but I really, really want to help people. And so, you talked about advice. My emotion is I don't want people to perceive me the wrong way or get the wrong impression. I want people to know that I'm doing this because I want to tell people they can be happy outside the church and truth matters. That's my message. And I would say, love your families. Whether you're Mormon or not, family is the most important thing. That's it. And what you mentioned, what do I believe? I will say that I'm still Christian because, and I will say I am Christian because Christ, the message of Christ is a great one. Do unto others, be kind. I don't want to have a discussion on the podcast about Christianity, true or false, because Christ never hurt me. I love Christ. I will keep trying to be like him. As far as going to another church, I don't see it happening. I will attend other churches, but I don't see me joining another church for a long time, if ever. That part's burnt. That's been burnt away. That desire to want to start paying tithing or participating in some other church, that's going to be a hard one to get back. And so, yeah, that's part of the emotion too. You feel super naive and less trusting now.
Yeah. So, again, I'll just end with this. Are you and your family happier and healthier now than 6 months ago?
I would say absolutely. We are happier and, healthier. To be honest, I would say we're healthier because it's just we're emotionally healthier. I actually believe that coffee's good for you. And, there's been a lot of studies. And I, don't drink.
What about the unity between your estranged daughter and now the rest of the family?
That's a good story. The night that we talked about the church not being true, the night that I told my son that the church wasn't true, he went over to my daughter's house and she laughed and she was happy. We are united. The 5 of us in my immediate family are 100% united now, and it's a great feeling. The estranged family, there's been, I don't want to even get into that. It's hurtful.
I mean, your immediate family.
Oh, my immediate family has never been closer. Since my daughter found out the church wasn't true, from asking questions in seminary, there has been a rift that we could never understand. And we are united now, and it's fantastic.
And that's the most important thing. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't be happier because of that.
All right, Clay Christensen. Well, it's been a real pleasure. Let me give a shout out to Matt. Matt, we love you.
Yes.
And Clay and Lori, we love you too. But Clay, we're so grateful you would tell your story. So many people were touched by your story last December. And we just want to say thank you for coming back on, for giving us the update, for letting us know that the church continues to excommunicate people just for being open and honest about their doubts. And we just, I guess they're showing us their colors, but we're grateful for you. We're grateful for you and your courage. It's as courageous for you to do what you're doing as other people. So we just want to celebrate you and your courage, because you're blessing lives just like other people. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. And listeners, thanks for joining us. I'll turn it back around just for a second. Thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories. Please come on to mormonstories.org and share your comments. If you want to thank Clay, if you have other questions for Clay, you can share it there. Those of you who support us financially at mormonstories.org, that's what makes this possible. So please donate if you can. And we'll keep doing great things in the Open Stories Foundation. We'll be having a really incredible retreat this mid-July, July 15th, 16th in Park City. We've had several of these retreats now. They're all about healing and growth. They're very positive. They're very affirming. But they're all about, bringing mental health professionals in to support transitioning Mormons to heal and then create a new, beautiful life after they've left Mormon Orthodoxy. Whether they stay in the church or leave, we want to help people find community and get the tools and support that they need to grow. So if you're interested in one of the retreats, go to mormontransitions.org and you can sign up for the retreats there. In addition, check out other podcasts we have, like Mormon Matters, A Thoughtful Faith, Gay Mormon Stories, Mormon Transitions podcast. Open Stories Foundation is doing great things, and all these podcasts need your support. Please support female podcasters out there like Lindsay Hansen Park and Gina Colvin and Christy Money and others. There's a huge disparity in what male versus female podcasters receive in contributions, and we just want to give a shout out to our female podcasters out there and say they deserve our support, not just our verbal support, not just our listenership, but also our financial support. So donate to those things. And we're grateful for everything, and we'll be doing a series very soon on rape and BYU and LDS culture. That's coming up. We're also going to be doing a really, really cool series on early mission return. So we've got several missionaries who lost their testimonies while on their missions, and they either came home early or lied through their mission because they were so scared and came home afterwards, having served a mission after losing their faith. And it's going to be a great episode all about helping the church and the culture try and treat these people more humanely. That's what we need. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Clay and all those who help out. And we'll see you again soon on Mormon Stories. Take care. If I can find the goodbye button. Take care.